Yes, I can see cars.
Right, we'll start on a lighter note today. I got to drive around the Formula One track last week in one of these beasts, which was absolutely awesome if you're into driving fast cars. I didn't realize after my missus had booked it for me when I started looking at videos on YouTube that it's actually one of the most demanding in the world. And it was awesome. And I have posted it on Twitter. So if anybody's into being a speed freak and wants to see what it's like driving around a Formula One track, then please feel free. Right, more serious notes. Yesterday, my electricity went off along with the rest of Portugal and Spain and parts of Italy and allegedly parts of Belgium and France went off as well. I don't know if you all saw it in the news, and it was all really rather weird and rather spooky because the internet went off and my phone went off. And in fact, my Spanish phone is still not working yet. I still have one from Spain and WhatsApp's working, but the phone is not working. And Spain a week ago was celebrating. They're now woohoo on 100% renewable power. So no more coal, no more nothing. And then 6 days later, as it says here, from I think it's probably from Global Hedge, it went off. And then initially, whilst the Spanish Prime Minister was saying we don't want any conspiracy theories and it's no proof that it's a cyber attack, there was a rumor put out by the power company that it was to do with a rare atmospheric phenomenon, which was later retracted as a statement. But it was really rather bizarre because we were stuck and nobody got any idea what was going on. And we were fortunate in that because we used to live on an island, I've always had this thing where I've always got loads of water and dried food and tinned food. So I'm a mini prepper. And toilet rolls, obviously, enough of those, as we remember back to the chaos from the COVID crisis. Not really. And we've got gas cooker, so we can cook, and we're okay. We've got candles, we've got batteries, torches, and lots of spare batteries, candles, and a gun. No, I haven't got a gun. It's a water pistol. We don't allow them in Portugal. But I do understand why people in some countries might feel that way. And then it kind of made me realize and remember I used to have a wind-up radio and a wind-up torch as well was also very useful. And it all sounds a little bit strange, but yeah, that went on for 12 hours. The shops all closed because the tills wouldn't work. So there were queues outside some shops that were open, letting people buy water. Why people possibly would only have 1 day's supply of water is beyond me. But it was really rather strange. And then, yeah, it was spooky, Pam. And I say the worst of it is we've no idea what's going on. And obviously the danger, well, we'd no idea when it was coming back on either because there was just no news, no messages at all. And anyway, we all went to the pub and we sat in a bar, our local bar, and there were lots of Brits and Irish and Americans and Canadians and French and Germans and Portuguese, obviously, and some Spanish. And we just drank the place dry. And then for a while. And then during the middle of the night, it all came back on again. But it's still a bit wobbly at the minute. And I say I still haven't got my phone. So yeah, it was strange.
Wasn't the ATMs work not working as well, isn't it?
No, and that's another point. You have the EU and the British government, not the people, pushing to get everybody on a central bank digital currency, while yesterday there was no cash. And so, sorry, there was no way to use pay using a card or your phone. So suddenly people who don't have cash were absolutely stranded. So the moral of the story as well is always have some cash on hand and be mindful for the future what would happen. And this shows the stupidity. I read the other week in the UK, there's been over 200 hours in the last few years where the banks have gone down for extended periods of time, and it usually seems to happen on a weekend. So once again, they're trying to push you to a cashless society, and yet when the electric goes off, it doesn't work. Apparently, there were Teslas stopping in the middle of cities, running out of juice. And I read that you can't tow a Tesla. I think you have to lift them up to move them. So there were trains stranded, there were metro trains stranded in the tunnels. It was chaotic. And anyway, I'm going to kind of talk about that a little bit further when it comes to investing and trying to. I always talk about joining the dots. And as I say, my thinking now is I need to buy a wind-up radio and I need to buy a wind-up torch. I need to have more tinned food in the house, etc., just to be prepared. And I say I kind of developed this mentality in Lanzarote because a good friend of mine used to work for the water board there, and all the water in Lanzarote comes from the sea, and therefore it's full of chemicals, and you don't drink it, so you drink bottled. And I asked him years and years ago, I said, how days supply of water is there if it goes off? And he said, 1 day. 1 day's worth of water. So for bathing, anything else, toilets, there's nada. So again, I have loads of bottles in the garden that at least to be able to flush the toilet. But then when it comes to investing and you're thinking about joining the dots, is where the heck is all this going? And you look at what's going on in USA at the moment, and you look at what's going on in Europe. It needs some real strategic thinking to try to plan your way through this stuff. And then here, so this was an article going into more detail. And as I say, Sanchez, the Prime Minister of Spain, came out and he was saying there's no need to panic, whilst he was sending, I think, 30,000 troops and extra police to keep everybody calm. And we don't want any rumours about cyber attacks and anything else. But he was quite happy for this rumour to be doing the rounds to start off with. And then in this article, and I think you'll be able to read this one. There's an article in here, and it goes into great detail about why this happened. And because once you go on to full green fuel, that basically anything that the wind generators create, when you've got the wind, it's not storable. So the energy is either used or it goes. But basically, if there's a drop in power, and it wasn't a big drop, but that if there's a drop in the old days, you would have coal-fired, you would have nuclear, etc., and it would take up the slack. And also it's explaining in here how you have to have turbines that are moving, etc. So this is from a guy off Twitter explaining what was going on yesterday. So 60% was coming from solar, and you got wind, nuclear, etc., and then the combined cycle. That's why it went down. And then they were panicking last night because if a chunk of it's coming from solar, of course, when we get to the evening and there's none being stored and it's all gone, and turning it all back on was rather dangerous. And then you've got folks here stranded on electric trains in the middle of nowhere, many of whom didn't have any food or drink with them or any cash. Portugal's a lot more resistant to getting rid of cash. A lot of the bars and shops still will only take cash here, which I think is a great thing. The Spanish are a lot more into phones and cards for everything. So Portugal, I think, would resist the central bank digital currency as well. And if the idiots keep pushing forward for a central bank digital currency, and if people are stupid enough not to realize the implications, then it really, really would get very scary. And of course, also that has an impact potentially on crypto. I was thinking, couldn't get in touch with anybody yesterday. I was thinking gold would have gone up and Bitcoin would have come down because, hey, without digital, Bitcoin doesn't work. But it didn't seem to cause any effect. It's obviously in Spanish. Oh, there's an English version here for you as well, about restoring electricity. To put it back on for such a huge region in itself, apparently, it clearly is very difficult. But this was what was going on yesterday here in the good old EU. And El País, so they talked about what caused it, and they're saying they're not going to speculate, insisted the government official, even though we had that nonsense about this meteorological phenomenon. And they blamed this as well. If you recall, last year there was some serious flooding in Spain. This was saying yesterday, 90% of Spaniards, and I think, well, it was all the way from where we are in the south of Portugal up past Lisbon yesterday. And then this article's talking about net zero could be blamed for the chaos. And the UK, under the current leadership, are going full on for net zero, i.e. get rid of coal-powered stations, etc. But in Spain in November last year, there was a serious flooding in Valencia, and there were a lot of people killed, and the place was absolutely destroyed. And one of the reasons put forward for it, as usual, global warming was put forward, but there was actually an even worse flood in Valencia in the 50s, I recall, and they diverted the river. And apparently there was talk of diverting the river again and some of the infrastructure above Valencia recently, and guess what? The government didn't get around to doing it. But what the EU have been doing is they've been removing a lot of dams and barriers to help restore rivers across Europe, and they were trumpeting that in 2023. There was a strong rumour in 2024 last year that maybe the dams caused the issue of Valencia. It has since been denounced as a conspiracy theory. Having said that, nowadays the distance between a conspiracy theory and reality, somebody put a quote on Twitter the other day, is about 6 months. And we'll have a look at that in a moment. So, the clowns in charge of the UK. UK's got enough coal to last another 100 years. They've got gas, they've got the North Sea oil, which they're currently cutting down on production and not allowing any expansion. And so now they're buying oil from Norway at a higher price. And it's the oil that comes from the North Sea where the British own oil. And then they're going to go more for solar panels. And they're also going for solar panels on prime farmland, which is idiotic. In Spain and in Portugal, you'll see public buildings have all got solar panels. And also here in Portugal, all the car parks, anywhere that there's a car park on a supermarket and a mall, all have got solar panels. UK wants to do it onto prime farmland. And then Ed Miliband, the lunatic in charge of the green thing in the UK, admits that the solar panels that they're buying for English schools and hospitals are from China and they are made using coal. So we're not going to use our own coal. We're going to import them from China, who are expanding the amount of coal-fired power stations that they've got. We're going to then stick them on a boat and ship them halfway around the world, and that is going to be greener and cleaner for the UK. And this is the lunatic in charge of it all. M&S, one of the biggest supermarkets in the UK, currently has an issue with a cyber attack that's been going on for 4 or 5 days. And that is the concern, one of the concerns about what happened yesterday with the power. Then the other part of the idiocy. So they're going to put more and more solar panels in the UK. The UK has the fifth least amount of sun in the world. So we're going to push full on for solar power when we don't get much sun. And when my daughter went to university in England, she grew up in Lanzarote where we have sunshine 300 days of the year. She went to the UK and she was very fit and very active. And after 3 months, she was tired all the time. Went to the doctors and it turned out it was vitamin D deficiency. Vitamin D deficiency also during COVID apparently was one of the contributing factors for people who got it particularly badly or particularly often. So again, the master race, the great plan from our leaders is we're going to put more and more solar panels in a country where there's no sun. Now, the next thing is the conspiracy theories from 6 months ago is now turns out to be reality. If you live in the UK, parts of the USA, you may well have seen these recently. These are not natural streams left by aeroplanes. These are a grid system where they are putting chemicals into the air. Oh, it's a conspiracy mark theory. It's a load of bullshit. Oh, actually, no. We're going to allow £50 million to the British government to try it. So once again, they're pushing for solar panels imported from another country where the toxicity is greater than the UK and there's no sun. And now they're going to dim the sun because that means to reduce carbon footprint. Please, somebody tell me it makes sense, please. In the US now, Tennessee, I think there's 10 states in the USA have now banned this. And once again, a year ago, this was all said to be conspiracy theories nonsense. Now, one of the things that is clearly going on at the moment is the US economy is in danger. And I must confess, I have quite a lot of US stocks and assets, and I am beginning to think that I need to move away from some of them at least, because at the moment the dollar is down 4 or 5% so far this year, and there's a good chance it could keep going down. So our good friends at Goldman Sachs in March said US economy downgraded amid Wall Street backlash. Things are going to be terrible. And then 3-4 weeks later, they reported they just had their best quarter ever. So as ever, they know how to play the game better than you. And the message again, of course, is you should put your money with them because they know what they're doing. I disagree. But again, it shows all the stupidity of everything that's going on. And then they have warned now about material risk to the US and global economy. And I was reading yesterday that the amount of shipping around the world is down significantly with all these global tariffs because companies have either bought in and stockpiled, or they're simply saying we're going to wait and see what Trump does next. And I think everybody is beginning to get a little bit twitchy. Now, Goldman Sachs chief economist says that the dollar has further to fall, and he says, although I dodged the question about predicting, but then he goes on to predict that it's going to get worse. Now, if you recall, Goldman Sachs one of their top analysts, I think it was in December 22 or 23, said that December was going to be the best month ever for the US stock market, and it all dropped by 15%. So you kind of treat it all with a pinch of salt. But on the other hand, there is a drip of negative news. And you have to think whereby the China and Japan, who were previously the biggest buyers of US debt, i.e. government bonds, treasury bills, have been cutting back significantly. And it appears as though they've now stopped. And other countries are doing the same. And as I said to you weeks ago, who wants to lend money? If it was a company, the USA is bankrupt. The only reason the USA is continuing is because they control the printing presses of the world. But if people turn away and investors turn away, then the danger is that that will not be the case. So Trump now at 100 days really needs to do something positive, because as this says, one of the headlines talks about, yeah, brand USA is being damaged and it is making people think about it. So then you would say, okay, well, where do you put your money? The pound is up 7 or 8%. Woohoo, we'll put it into the British economy. No, it's run by idiots. And the UK economy, they raised the rates that the employers have to pay last year significantly. That's just kicking in now. And on top of everything else that's going on in the UK and the nonsense there, I would not want my money in the UK either, nor in the Eurozone. So any suggestions? Anybody think what's a good place to put some money? One clue is that the warmongers in the Eurozone, and you've got Starmer, the fraud who's in charge of the UK, is having his photo taken with the army and the navy, and we's going to win it. We're going to send troops in. I don't think they've got a functioning battleship, because last time it left dry dock and set off out of the harbour, they had to tow it back because it didn't work. They've underfunded the military for so long. Soldiers are leaving in record numbers because they don't want anything to do with it. And the French have never got involved in anything in the last 20 years, to my knowledge, officially, because they have always been very reluctant to get involved. But it would appear they are going to spend, I think it's 800 billion on defence, i.e. weapons, i.e. planes and bombs and drones. So unless you have a moral debate with yourself whether you want to get involved in something, then it is certainly a sector to think about. Equally, clickbait headline yesterday from the Telegraph: China invades Taiwan, Japan steps in. What the headline is not, well, what the headline is saying is to get you to click on it, but what they're saying is that the Japanese Air Force is getting ready for a war with China, and there is a deal between Japan, US, UK, as usual, got their little oar stuck in there, and Australia and New Zealand, I think, for the Pacific, that if China goes into Taiwan, then this lot are ready for it. If you look at the size of the Chinese Navy and the Chinese Air Force and the Chinese Army, I don't think it would last 5 minutes, personally, but that would be the end financially for Australia, as I've explained to you many times before. So I don't want to put my money in Australia. I've shown you many times before, Australia, something like 30-odd% of their exports go to China. If China invades Taiwan, then the Australians have to, under the agreement that they have with the Americans, etc., they have to impose sanctions on China, and they will stop supplying them stuff. If you lose your biggest customer, who's taking 30% of your sales as a business, you're screwed. Deutsche Bank flags sharp drop in US asset inflows from foreign investors. And LinkedIn, Ray Dalio again saying it's too late, the world's going to end. He's getting a bit like Ray Kiyosaki at the moment. It's every other week is Dalio saying it's the end of the world. But he does come across in a more sensible, intelligent way than Kiyosaki, and he does make some interesting points. So again, I will put the link for this if those of you want to have a read about this later. And then the Telegraph again, Trump is destroying the dollar. He's playing a dangerous game. It's starting to look like that could be a thing. I mean, I thought a month ago that he was playing the long game and he was part of the negotiating for the deal, but we're now getting to twitchy bomb time with all of this. And then all of this is Trump, 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 and what he's doing to the world. And then here, the leader, Starmer from the UK, the one who's jailing middle-aged women for Facebook posts. And he came out in December saying, UK does not need to choose between the US and the EU. And he said it again in February, which for him is quite unusual. He's been consistent for a month or two. And then the idiot who's in charge of finance in the UK, she now suggests that the UK trade with EU is more important than the US. She said it whilst in the US, whilst they're supposed to be negotiating a better deal with Trump on tariffs. So as ever, not the smartest move in the world. And it's even less smart when you look at the 20 top 10 exports for the UK. By a mile, the United States is the biggest export customer. So you're in the US, you're trying to negotiate a better deal, and you're saying, well, actually, we'd be better off with Germany and Ireland and Netherlands, etc. Now, when you add up cumulatively all the other countries in the EU, yes, it is probably bigger than the USA, but in one particular one group, it is not. And the important thing as well is, as far as the EU goes, Germany's been in recession now for 2 years and is not coming out of it. And this article is talking about the first quarter. The tariffs are only going to start to kick in now, but already Germany's growth was down. I think it was 0.2% after 2 years of being in the doldrums. And Germany's battle is greater than just the tariffs. They have suffered substantially because they were getting cheap fuel from Russia, which they no longer are. And also they're losing a significant amount of their exports to China of cars, because China is now producing its own cars and I believe is also imposing tariffs on the EU. So, say, Madam there is wanting to align closer to Europe. And then the Eurozone economy facing a dark future is what the ECB policymakers want. So again, I don't want money, assets, tied up in the EU. Bitcoin poised for strongest weekly gain. I read something this morning somebody saying, oh, that Bitcoin's on the cusp of a crash. And it's like, well, last week there was more money flowed into Bitcoin. And this is through the big funds. So this is big money, not particularly retail. But I had flagged this out to members of my investing group. I think I may have talked to you guys about it last week. But I said to folks last week, look, Bitcoin made a move on the 20th of April. And so I said to folks in my group, well, in which case MicroStrategy is probably going to follow. And MicroStrategy, surprise, surprise, followed. Why? Because they own 10% of the world's Bitcoin. MicroStrategy as stock was up 17% in 5 days. That was predictable. That was an M2 breakout. Now, when it comes to stocks and crypto, particularly crypto-related stocks, I don't always wait for the pullback. If this does pull back down to around 310, I would buy more of it. Not financial advice as ever. But then other crypto, I haven't bought any more Ethereum because I just don't know what Ethereum's going to do. It was always silver to Bitcoin's gold, and it's kind of losing its shine of late. And the usage of it is suspect, and there are other things that came out. So if you recall in January, I think it was December, January last year, those in my investing group remember I converted half of my Ethereum into Bitcoin, whilst Bitcoin was down and Ethereum was up over 3 grand, because I just got the feeling that Bitcoin would be the better long term. Now, I have bought some Solana in recent weeks. I bought Solana at 119. I have bought it higher up, and I also bought it originally, and my initial buy was September, October of 23. And yes, you guessed it, it was a break of a long-term trend line, and then it was the break of EMAs as well as. So I bought a bit more of that in the recent weeks, and that is up 27%. Now, the issue I've had with crypto of late, a lot of them rejected, many times they rejected trend lines, then they got through. And normally I would wait for price to break through the EMAs as well. So I do have an alarm set here. If everything sets off, and when crypto sets off, it goes very fast often, then I have got an alarm set here to watch it. And then also I'd be interested to buy again at 140 and especially back down around 120. I also in recent weeks bought some more Cardano. Cardano was in an accumulation phase. It hadn't even broken this, but the group around Trump. Charles Hoskins, the boss man for this, is one of the people in the group. I think that they would benefit from it. And I showed you how it went up. I think it was 300% before Christmas. This was when Trump got in. Again, M2 breakout, significant move. And I was telling folks all last summer, I was buying it at 50, 35, 40, 50 cents. It was in a clear consolidation phase. I haven't bought any more Link of late. I must have bought some up there, some there, and some there. I haven't bought any in the last month or so. This is one of those I would wait for it to break above the trend line and the EMAs. And Litecoin, I haven't bought any of that recently, although I must have got some in here at 76. I did buy some XRP, again, consolidation in here. That has broken the trend line and it has now broken the 55 EMA. I only buy a crypto if I think it can make at least 35%, and that was 50% higher 8 weeks ago. So for me, that was a no-brainer. XRP is heavily involved in the discussions with the group that Trump has set up for crypto, a much more positive SEC, and yeah, I'm quite happy buying that. I also bought some OH bar the other day. Again, break of a trend line and the break of the EMAs. I had bought some earlier in the month at 16, and I bought some more the other day at 19. I also bought some XLM, same reason. M2 break, finally broke through the EMAs as well. I didn't, because it's a very tiny gap in here. And I'm not talking about putting massive amounts of money in here. It's just, I own a significant amount of crypto anyway. 65% of what I own is Bitcoin, probably 10 of ETH now. And then the rest of it, small amounts, Solana and XRP, Cardano. Solana's about 5%, and then the rest probably averaging 3%. And then I've got a lot of silly ones that are less than 1%. And then what I am watching at the moment is PaxG. And that's for personal reasons, because in Portugal, crypto is not taxed if you hold it for more than a year. So I could, instead of holding gold, which I am taxed on, I could buy PaxG, hold it for more than a year. It's tied to gold. It's registered in New York, and just kind of reading more and more about the security aspect of it. But each token is allegedly matched by an equal amount of gold, and it is audited on a regular basis. As ever, none of this is financial advice, but that's one of the things I am doing at the moment. The other thing I'm doing, I've shown you this before, this is Yield Max, which is an ETF, and I have been buying this. I have put 10,000 into this now, and currently it is paying around 4% per month, and apparently that's down. That's down on what it has been for those who were in it earlier. I bought it where I have and got involved where I have in the last 6 weeks. I started on the 10th of March because the prices were down significantly. And I can't show you my portfolio, but I can show you one of them in here. Let's have a look at Tesla. Well, Tesla, no, I'm not really into Tesla. AMZY is this one. This is one I do own. So this is Amazon related. At the moment, it's paying 41% per annum distribution dividend. I started buying in up here, and I bought again in here. I think I bought down here as well. I can't remember. But they're paying out at the moment, and I did hedge it with an option. Any questions or comments? Zoe says about the UK and the sun and everything bonkers. Yep, that's why you're living in Australia. Yeah, Dan says this is the 5% stock prop firm you mentioned last week. Found it on their site. Yeah, this is. I'm trying to find the time to do this. Apparently, 5%ers now also have stocks, so you can trade stocks. I believe. I think this is the one. And also, Dan shared one with us last week about crypto. And I have emailed them, and their support is appalling, which always puts me off. So I haven't done anything about the crypto. But I think this is the one where you can buy stocks and trade stocks. So again, an interesting idea is if you can use other people's money for forex and other people's money for stocks and other people's money for crypto, then clearly you reduce your risk significantly. And so what I'm looking at, and I was talking to John yesterday, who's with us this morning. Hi, John. He's just come back from Vietnam, and he was telling me that he was talking to a trader there who has made a huge amount of money recently, and it's just he goes for big moves and big wins. But because he's doing it on a funded account, he's not risking a lot of his own money, which that kind of sounds interesting. So John and I are going to explore that in a little more detail in the next few days. Dan says, staying focused on FX for now, but thinking about the future. What prop firm allows you to trade stocks, says Zoe? 5% of Zoe. So I think this is the one. Yeah, how much capital you would like to make? Now, the only thing, of course, is I don't use stops when I'm buying stocks. I hedge, and so that could work against me with this, but I believe this is the one for stocks. Funded phase.
Hi, Mark. Yeah, it is. It
Yeah.
just takes you to a different page, and it's
Okay.
called the trading pool.
Okay, so that's one if anybody's thinking and they want to explore stocks as well. But as I've shown you with crypto, with stocks, everything I do is M2. It is put breakouts, it is breaks of trend lines, and then with stocks, it's got to be able to make 25% in a reasonably short period of time. And with crypto, it's got to be able to make at least 35%. When I say it's got to be able to do that, what I mean is that technically. So when I started buying into here, let's say now I'm cost averaged in here. Okay, this one doesn't quite fit the rule, but what I'm after with this one, I'm after the dividend. There are people who have bought in some of these. These are okay because maybe they bought in lower down. Some have bought up here and now they've seen a significant drop. So I started to buy in here. Again, we're looking trend line. The original trend line I think I had was there. So I had a break of a trend line, I had a break of an EMA, so I bought some there, I bought some more again here, and I bought some more down here when it was consolidated. So slightly different reasoning, but for me, this is to do with the dividend rather than stocks. And then for stocks, again, I'm still heavily into gold and gold miners, and I will continue to hold gold and gold miners because if the world turns to the messy stuff, then gold is the ultimate safe haven. The miners give you a chance for some leverage without using leverage. And what I mean by that, this I've shown you this many times before. AG, I bought some more AG the other week. Here, from a buy here to there to a recent high. Well, this recent high a month ago was 36%, and that recent high was 46%. So whereas gold in the same period of time only went up 3 or 4%. So I do that with gold and silver. I've got EMAs on, I've got trend lines on, I've got fibs on. I'm looking for pullbacks. This is one of the bigger ones. I don't think this would be a big enough potential gain. Oh, crikey, wrong thing I've clicked on. Oh, give over. Go away. So technically, this would be the region to be looking at for Alamos Gold. Having said that, I don't think it's enough potential upside. Well, 22%, it's something I would be interested in. Just 1 second. The wind has started kicking up and I have the window up and everything's banging. Just bear with me 1 second, please. Did somebody say, keen to hear your thoughts for trading M2 on these stocks? So yes, Dan, it's the same M2 I use for everything. It's trend lines, it's support and resistance, and it's the two EMAs. That's all I use. He's asking which indicators I've got in here. This one, if you just Google that in, will give you the two EMAs and it will give you the longer time frame EMAs. And then this one is something oh no, that's one that Phil made. So you can add the FMP daily range indicator on. And I've got something else on here that somebody sent me I was testing. This is to do with this high volume bar that you were talking about. You were asking questions about, Dan. Yeah, somebody sent me this the other week and said, is this legit? Well, what it does is it gives a signal generally after a move. So the volume moves and then it makes the move and then you get a signal. I've been watching it just to see if it reprints because a lot of these indicators they reprint. And what I mean by that, it says here buy. If it dropped here, then this would disappear and it would suddenly, next time you look, it would say sell. It doesn't seem to reprint. Whether it has any validity, I don't know. I looked at it for a few weeks And I just came to the conclusion it was giving the signals too late. It's giving a signal here right at the top. It's giving another signal here right at the top where we've got a trend line and multiple top area. So I've turned that off, but I was just having a look for somebody on that one. But I say that one's for the EMAs. So any other questions before we go to Ashley? No, no, Dan. I have about 50 different crypto. I have four different portfolios. The one I'm sharing with you is my main. This is the kind of the Premier League, if you think of football teams. These are the ones that I think have the potential to 10x perhaps, whereas my other league, the smaller ones I own, have the potential to maybe 50x and 60x like last time. I mean, last time, the first time we bought Cardano in 2020 for 5 cents and it went up to $3, which I think is 6,000% from memory. So they were the ones that made the insane gains last time. Same with XRP. It went from, I think, $5 to, 5 cents to 195. So these were the ones that made the big gains last time. What I have other parts of the portfolio, which are smaller ones, they're the higher risk ones, but they're the ones that potentially could make a significant amount of money. Right, I go to Ashley. My internet has managed to survive. My phone still hasn't come back on, and I'm going back into my cave in Portugal. I hope you've all enjoyed what I've been showing you, and I hope it gives you something to think about. Joining the dots. Well, if all this is going to happen, where should I be putting my money? What should I be doing? Where should I be thinking about what we're going to do? So, think it through. If you're in America, okay, the dollar goes down and the US stock market's okay, then you might be okay there. If you're outside the USA, you have to take into account the currency aspect of it, which is ironic as we're forex traders as well.